Hey everybody, bowling terms can be confusing. There's a lot of weird things people say, but there's a lot of other things that make perfect sense once you get it to click. So I put up a post on my community tab a few days ago asking for bowling terms that trip you up or that you don't get. So thanks for the responses and giving me so much to work with. I'm going to go through and explain as many as I can, as clearly as I can. And of course, if there's any I didn't cover here, put them in the comment section below and I'll make as many videos as necessary to cover all of them. And I am going to be working from something here, so sorry if this seems a little impersonal, but I've got to write stuff down because I have the ADD. So to start with, in this episode, we're going to talk about things that are just common sense or that mean exactly what they sound like they mean. So I've seen something pretty consistent over the last several years that I think will really help whenever you come across an unfamiliar term or some kind of bowling lingo that you haven't heard before, you don't understand. Most bowling terms, fortunately, are just regular words used to describe the situation or what's happening, but most people don't seem to make that connection for whatever reason. They hear a term or lingo used that they haven't heard before, and they kind of get stuck there. If you instead stop and think, okay, what's the definition of this word? What does it actually mean in everyday life or speech or whatever, and then apply it to the situation, I think you'll be able to figure it out the vast majority of the time. And that's the first category we're going to start in, terms that are exactly what they sound like or exactly what they mean. A lot of these terms are contextual too. So even if you're not a walking dictionary and don't know exactly what these words mean, just simply thinking about what happened and what the person is trying to describe will usually clue you in. The first one is friction. People will say the lanes are high friction, or to break a lane down, you need to create some friction, or for weak or shiny balls, you need to wait until some friction shows up in the track to be able to use this ball. The dictionary definition of friction is surface resistance to relative motion. So if you simply put the palms of your hand together and rub them against each other as fast as you can, you're creating friction, which will create heat and resistance. The more friction you create, the more something is going to stick or grab. That's why it's difficult to hold onto a bar of soap when it gets wet, for example, or why a ball that comes out of the back of the return or that comes back on the ball return with oil on it is slippery if you try to pick it up, because those are very low friction instances. If there's no oil on a lane, there's going to be a very high amount of friction between the surface of the ball and the lane, which is going to make the ball grip and hook off the lane. But when you put oil on the lane, that creates slickness that prevents the ball from gripping the lane or the lane from gripping the ball. As you continue to throw the ball down the lane, obviously the ball picks up more and more oil to the point that enough oil has been removed from the lane that the ball can get more grip and actually create hook or traction. Traction is another similar word while we're at it. Traction is related to friction, and the definition of traction is the adhesive friction of a body on a surface, such as a wheel on a rail or a tire on a road. If you're driving on snow and are spinning your tires and the car isn't moving, you're not getting any traction because you have no friction. But as soon as you either burn through the snow or are driving on a dry road, the tires are getting traction on the road by creating friction with the road surface. So that lets the tires grip the road and makes the car move. Obviously, I'm not trying to insult anybody's intelligence. I'm just walking through this here. People use plastic balls to shoot at spares because it's a very low traction or low friction cover type, even with a bone dry lane. This means it's going to go straighter and hook less, even if you're revving it up or spinning it more quickly. Reactive balls are designed to create more friction with the lane to produce a stronger and more dynamic ball reaction into and through the pins. A stronger and more dynamic ball motion creates more force into and through the pins, which helps to knock them all down more often. Okay, I heard it there. The track is another term that I mentioned above. So when someone says they want to create more friction in the track, or there's more friction in the track, the track is a term for the highest use or most popular area for the bowling ball to be thrown. Most of the time for righties, it's around third arrow, because if you watch most people bowl, they're going to be playing on or around third arrow most of the time in most league situations. It's a very common area of the lane for people to play with reactive balls. Over the years, as people throw hundreds and thousands and even millions of shots down the lane, that area becomes more and more worn. So what was once a smoother, slicker surface has now started to become worn down from use and will gradually become higher and higher friction. So even if you were to use the same oil, the same lane machine, lay down the same pattern over the years, the lane will continue to hook more and more just due to the surface wear in the actual lane surface. Track or tracks means an area or a path made by repeated use or travel. Basically the same thing as a trail, just that track is the word that the bowling community adopted to describe that. The heads is another term in reference to a bowling lane, and that refers to the front or early part of the lane, usually from the foul line to the dots, maybe even the arrows. Some people also say the fronts as well, which I think makes more sense. But when someone says the heads are fried or the fronts are gone, they're referring to the same thing, or those terms describe the same situation. Head has many definitions, of course, but the one being used here is the foremost part or front end of something, which would be the area at the head or front part of the lane past, front part of the lane up to the arrows. So to start putting some of this together, if the heads are fried, it means that enough shots have been thrown, that enough oil has been removed from the front part of the lane that the ball is starting to get traction and create too much friction in the head or front part of the lane, which is making it go offline as soon as it hits the lane. If you've ever thrown a shot that felt good but ended up being a couple boards inside your target and that confused you, like it felt like an accurate shot, but the ball missed inside, it could be that the ball actually moved because of head burn or because the heads were fried. Segueing there as well, people will also say the heads are burnt up, and that also means that it means what it sounds like and what we were just kind of talking about. Like I said earlier with rubbing your hands together, when you do that, you're creating heat through the friction. If there's no friction, you can't create heat. So if you put on some lotion, or even better, some vegetable oil on your hands or something, and there's some of that Diddy oil, and try to rub your hands together, you're not going to get much, if any, heat until you wear through the lotion or oil and your hands start getting some traction with each other. Then you'll start creating friction, which will make it harder to rub your hands together and also start creating heat. When someone says the heads are burnt, that's just what they mean. Or when the lanes are sparking, or when the lanes are sparking, or that ball sparked when it hit the lane, that's slang for meaning that the oil has been removed from the front part of the lane and the ball is creating a lot of friction, which causes it to hook too early, which means you're going to need to either loft the ball over it or move or change where you're throwing the ball to a part of the lane that still has oil on it. Loft is another one. I think this is fairly simple or self-explanatory, but loft means to throw or hit something into the air to clear an obstacle. Common golf term when you're trying to loft the ball up over a sand bunker or water or rough patch, you're trying to get it up in the air to clear whatever is in your way by lofting the ball over it. It's the exact same concept in bowling. The heads or the fronts of the lane will typically dry up faster than the track will because there's a much smaller area that you're laying the ball down in. So several people can be laying the ball down on 15, for example, but depending on where they're aiming, the ball can go several different directions. So I can lay the ball down on 15 to shoot at a left side spare, or I can go straight, either go this way or go this way, but we're still laying it down in the same place. But the common denominator is that the ball is actually touching the lane first on the 15 board with every shot. Sometimes the heads might get burnt and start to hook too much because several people they're laying the ball down in the same spot. But if they're not all following the exact same path down the lane, the heads will transition and dry up faster than the middle part of the lane, or the mids will, which can create over-under. I'll talk about the mids and over-under next. To finish the thought, though, sometimes lofting is necessary because if the heads start hooking too much, or so much that the ball is getting offline too early and hooking too much or going high, but when you move inside a little bit and all of a sudden the ball is going too long and is not hooking enough, that's what's called over-under. That can be solved by lofting over the friction in the heads or the fronts to keep the ball online if the mids or the track hasn't gotten enough friction into it yet. Over-under is a term that may not seem or feel like it's self-explanatory when it really is, but I give people a pass on this one because it's kind of a contraction or a shortened version of overhooking or underhooking. Just like it's is short for it is, or doesn't is short for does not. This just means the ball is either overhooking or underhooking, and specifically in reference to failed adjustments. Like if you're in a middle stage of transition where the lanes aren't fresh anymore, but you haven't created any significant friction in the heads or in the track, you might start to experience overhooking and underhooking at the same time. That means that seemingly no matter what adjustment you're making, the ball hooks too much on one shot and not enough on another, to the point that it seems unfair or unsolvable. There is a difference between a lane condition being tough and one being over-under, but over-under can be used to describe an exceptionally difficult lane condition. So when someone says that they're getting over-under, or the ball or the condition is over-under, it means it's difficult to consistently get the ball to the pocket. Transition is also something that's exactly what it sounds like. When a lane is transitioning, that means that the reaction is starting to change from the fresh pattern to the oil becoming depleted. So technically the lane is in a state of transition from the very first ball thrown on it to the very last ball that picks up the last little drop of oil. Transition just means that as the balls go down the lane, they pick up more and more oil, which means the ball reaction gradually changes. Bowling is the absolute most unfair sport or game. It's the most unfair sport or game there is because it's completely blind. You can see that the lanes are slick after they're oiled, but the only way you can tell what your ball is going to do is by throwing something repeatedly to build a picture in your head of where the oil is and where it isn't, so that you can decide the best place and the way to throw the ball to strike consistently. As the lanes transition, you can go from striking to not striking, throwing the same ball exactly the same place in the same way, because as the oil is removed, more traction and more friction is created with every single shot, but you never know exactly what the ball is going to do before you throw it. You can predict or anticipate it, but you can't guarantee it. What people mean, though, when they use the term is that all bowlers generally have several shots, several frames, or maybe even an entire game or more where their ball reaction remains the same despite oil continuing to be removed. When someone says we're getting into transition, or the lanes are starting to transition, that means the ball reaction is actually starting to change. So the same shot that they've been throwing so far and doing just fine with is now starting to behave differently or create different results. And they'll also talk about stages of transition. Each stage, or early stages, are when you can generally make small adjustments and stick with the same ball. Moderate transition usually requires bigger moves and or ball changes. And heavy transition means a lot of the oil has been removed and you've had to make significant changes, significant moves and ball changes to keep up with the transition. We talked about the heads/fronts. So what about mids or mid lane and back end? People will often say a ball controls the mids or the mid lane. That's a big kind of buzz word or phrase. And then is sharp or smooth on the back end. These terms should also be fairly explanatory, but to be fair, mids or mid lane could mean the middle of the lane from side to side rather than front to back. So a bowling lane is 60 feet long. Heads or fronts generally means the first 10 to 15 feet, but it's kind of technically the first 20. But when people say the heads are fried, they generally mean the first 10 to 15 feet. The mid lane or mids is from 20 to 40 feet, and then past 40 feet is the back end part of the lane. Most oil patterns are around 40 feet long, so that's the median or average length that creates a reasonable or fair ball reaction. So when someone says a ball is controlling the mids well, or seeing the mids well, or reading the mids or mid lane, they mean the ball is starting to hook or stabilize in the middle distance part of the lane, so that when it hits the back end, which is both the back or end part of the lane, and the lane condition as well, it's ready to change direction and move in the direction it's rolling or rotating in. A ball that doesn't control the mid lane well means one that is just spinning and that you can tell isn't starting to slow down or starting to hook or starting to transition from going the way that you threw it to the way that it's rolling or rotating in. It's just struggling to make anything happen, and then either doesn't hook or finish strongly enough, or kind of dies when it hits the friction at the end of the lane condition. Given that the lanes are generally only oiled for about 40 of the 60 feet of length, there's dry lane from the end of the pattern to the pins, which gives the ball a chance to grab to get traction by creating friction to really move into the pins with power. So when someone says this ball is smooth or sharp on the back end, they're talking about the visible motion of when the ball starts moving in the direction that it's being rolled or rotated. Now, while we're here, and since we just talked about traction and friction, the ball moving on the back end isn't hook, it's response. Hook is what actually starts to happen in the mid lane. You throw the ball a certain direction, but if you throw the ball a certain direction, but are generally rotating it kind of sideways or in a different direction than you're throwing the ball. So the ball's going this way, rotating this way. So if the ball gets no traction or creates no friction and therefore doesn't hook, it's just going to keep going in the direction it's traveling, like a car hydroplaning or skidding on ice. If the car is sliding in a certain direction on ice, you can turn the steering wheel and spin the tires a different direction. But if you can't get any traction or create any friction between the tires and the ground, the car will continue to slide in the direction it's traveling rather than the direction the tires are pointed and rotating in. Hook is when the ball stops going the direction it's traveling and creates enough traction or friction to turn in the direction it's rotating. So hook is what happens in the middle part of the lane when the ball stops going the direction it's traveling in and starts to go more in the direction that it's rotating in. So hook is when the ball stops going the direction it's traveling and creates enough traction or friction to turn in the direction it's rotating, and then back end would be when the ball finally responds and starts traveling in the direction that it's rotating. Hook is what makes back end possible, because if a ball doesn't hook and change direction, it then can't make an effective move on the back end. Hook stop, jerk stop, puking, rolling out, dying, missing the spot, not seeing it, etc. are all in the same family and basically mean the same thing. When a ball visibly gives up and hits or goes through the pins very weakly, but there is some variation. Hook stop or jerk stop generally means the ball reacted sharply but lost axis rotation and rolled out or went forward. So if you have the ball traveling this way, it's rolling this way, but it picks up on the back end and then goes kind of in between those. So it just stops and kind of dies and goes forward. That means that, and the direction is in relation to the lane, not the ball. So if something rolls out or goes forward, that means it's going the direction the lane is, not forward in the direction it's rotating in. So yeah, the ball's going this way, it's rolling this way. Going forward means it just goes straight off the end of the lane. That's a bad thing, of course. You don't want you don't want a ball going straight into the pins, so that's why we put spin on a bowling ball. With the arrangement of the pins, if you hit the head pin or front pin dead on, the ball will go straight through, and most of the time leave you with a split because the pins the ball hits aren't properly taking out the other pins in the rack. That means that hitting between the 1 and 3 pin for righties and the 1 and 2 pins for lefty is the most ideal way to get the pins to the ball hits to take out all the other pins and give you a strike. However, because again the head pin is in front, the ball is going to hit, if you hit it on one side or the other, the ball is going to hit it first and deflect. So to properly and consistently strike, the ball needs to go straight back through the 1, 3, 5, and 9 pins for a righty. But if the ball is going straight into the pins, it's going to hit the head pin and deflect to the right. So this is why we spin or rev the ball. So if the ball is going into the 1-3 pocket at an angle, that will offset the deflection caused by the head pin and make the ball properly travel through the pins. Well, when a ball hook stops or pukes, it rolls out and goes forward or dies. It's not driving through the pins at the right angle, so it's going to deflect and usually leave pins, possibly even splits, like the 8-10 or 7-10, or maybe even the dreaded lily or sour apple, which is the 5-7-10. A few more bonus lingo. Hook stop or rolling out is typically when the ball has not controlled the mid lane or started to hook early enough, so when it hits the hard friction or dry at the end of the lane condition, it hasn't hooked enough yet or hasn't stabilized or slowed down and started to change direction. So instead of being ready to turn and go in the direction it's rolling or rotating, it's still going the direction you threw it. That means when it hits the friction, it's going to lose axis rotation very quickly or roll out or hook stop because it's basically burning too much energy too quickly. If a ball instead starts hooking and or slowing down and starting to change direction in the mid lane, it does it more gradually so that the ball is able to maintain momentum. So it's kind of like making a turn in a car. Most of the time, you're traveling too quickly to make the turn without braking or moving into it. So you lightly apply the brake. The car starts to slow down. You're turning the wheel, and if you do it correctly, the tires maintain even contact with the road, and the car goes the direction that you've turned the wheels. If you instead go into a turn too quickly, the tires are going to skid because the momentum of the car is exceeding or fighting the traction or friction from the tires. And depending on how fast you're going and how big of an angle the turn you're trying to make is, you might just blow straight through the curve or end up somewhere in the middle. If you just blow straight through the back end and the ball barely attempts to move or doesn't move at all, that's what they call missing the spot or not seeing it. Missing the spot is the ball continuing past the distance you want it to start moving at, and not seeing it is basically the same thing. It's like when you're out driving and you miss your turn or fail to stop the location you were traveling to because you didn't see it. Puking or burning up is more used to describe when the ball has encountered too much friction too early, and I've used this analogy a lot before, but it's like snow tires versus racing slicks. Big, strong sanded balls are like snow tires. They're designed to dig through heavy oil and create traction or friction that the lane condition doesn't want to give them. This is why people will use strong sanded balls or even urethane on heavily oiled lanes, because while urethane isn't very sharp or responsive on the back end, it's extremely strong and early because it's very good at digging through oil. There's a balance that has to be maintained for them to be effective, though. It's a similar concept to golf too. Your driver is designed to be the longest club in your bag, and provided that you have plenty of distance to cover, it's going to work out. However, if you don't have the distance, if you hit your driver 250 yards, but you're on a 150-yard hole, you're going to overshoot it by 100 yards. Yes, this is, of course, assuming you can hit it straight, but I digress. Just like tires and bowling balls, if you have plenty of snow for the snow tires to dig into, they're obviously not going to get you as good of traction or create as much friction as a dry tire on dry road would be, but they're going to be your best bet. However, if you're a NASCAR driver with plenty of friction and traction to work with, snow tires are the last thing that you want, because you're not trying to dig through snow. You're trying to maximize surface area of tire in contact with the track. If you put snow tires on a stock car, they'd slip and slide all over the place. The tire would get chewed up in a heartbeat, because with all the teeth on the tire, there's actually significantly less surface area of the tire to work with. Strong balls with surface on them have teeth to dig through the oil and get some contact with the lane so that they can hook. But if there's not enough or much oil on the lane, they're going to hook too much too early and burn up or puke. The tricky thing here is that rolling out or hook stopping and puking or burning up are due to two different things, but they can look very similar. The main key here to help you figure out which is to throw a weaker ball. If a ball is rolling out or hook stopping, a weaker ball is also going to roll out and or hook less, miss the spot, or not see it. But if a ball is burning up or puking, the weaker ball should hook more or finish stronger. Something rolls out or jerks and stops when it's not hooking enough early enough. But if a ball burns up or pukes when it's hooking too much too early, and being able to figure out the difference is very important when it comes to making the correct adjustment. This is a lot to take in and get through, so I'm going to hit the pause button here. We'll pick up in a different video. Next episode, we'll talk about lane conditions, reading a lane graph, and the lingo that goes along with that. So expect to hear explanations for things like shim, flat, cliffed, house shot, challenge pattern, sport shot, mills, ratio, length, volume, buff, forward and reverse, soup, what is ice oil or fire oil or terrain oil, pattern names, so on and so forth. And we'll also talk more about the lane surface itself as it relates or applies. Now, I also have another video coming out on miscellaneous terms that may not make sense, like clean, chuggy, tumbly, trip 4, trip 6, drive by, plaque 10, plaque 7, miss it at the bottom, thumbed it, throw 9, get 9, etc. So if you have additional terms to add that you didn't hear in this video or didn't hear me just say, drop them in the comments below and I'll make sure I include them. And if there's something that goes along with the theme of this video or any other one that I don't cover, I might make a video picking up the lost terms or might just explain them in the comments section. So be sure to look down there just in case. There will probably be some good discussion or clarification to supplement what I talked about in this video. Thanks for watching, and may the strikes be with you.